The Korean War is often remembered as a conflict of maneuver and firepower, but, one of its most decisive forces never fired a shot. Cold shaped everything. During the winters of 1950 and 1951, temperatures routinely fell below -20 degrees Celsius, sometimes even lower up in the high ground of North Korea. What most people do not realize is that tens of thousands of soldiers entered those winters without modern cold weather sleeping systems. Many did not have sleeping bags at all. The question of how soldiers slept, whether they slept at all, became a matter of operational survival, not comfort. Units that failed to solve this problem collapsed without enemy contact, while those that adapted could continue to fight. If this kind of overlooked wartime reality matters to you, consider subscribing to Echoes of Valor. This channel exists to examine how wars are actually endured, not just how they are fought. Cold in Korea was not an incidental hardship. It was a strategic condition that exposed assumptions carried over from World War II. Commanders expected hardship, but, few anticipated how quickly cold alone could incapacitate men, weapons, and logistics. Sleeping, in particular, became a battleground between physiology and environment. The first Korean winter revealed honestly just how unprepared modern armies still were. When United Nations forces advanced rapidly north in late 1950, supply planning, it assumed a short campaign. Cold weather gear lagged behind the pace of operations. Many units, relied on wool blankets, shelter halves, or improvised ground cover. Sleeping bags did exist, but they were often scarce, heavy, or just unsuitable for extreme cold when used improperly. Chinese and North Korean forces faced even harsher conditions. Many Chinese soldiers crossed the Yalu River with little more than cotton uniforms and thin quilts. Yet despite these shortages, large formations survived nights that should have been physically disabling. This was not luck. It was adaptation under pressure. The reality was that armies in Korea relearned an old lesson. Insulation matters more beneath the body than above it, and heat must be conserved, not generated. Soldiers slept on the ground only after they changed how they touched it. The ground in winter Korea was not neutral. Frozen soil acted as a heat sink, pulling warmth from the body through conduction. Lying directly on it, even wrapped in blankets, accelerated heat loss. Soldiers who survived learned to break contact with the ground first. Improvised bedding, became standard out there. Pine branches, straw from abandoned villages, rice chaff, and even frozen sod cut into blocks were layered beneath bodies. The thickness, honestly, mattered more than the material itself. Even low-quality insulation, if it was deep enough, trapped air and slowed heat transfer. This principle, it wasn't exactly new, but it had been forgotten by many modern units, who were just used to issued equipment. Korea, in a way, forced its rediscovery. Manuals written after the war would, really emphasize ground insulation as a primary defense against cold injury. Clothing systems were repurposed into sleep systems. Parkas were unbuttoned and laid over the torso. Trousers were worn inside out to reduce wind penetration. Boots were, loosened, but not removed, since frozen footwear could become impossible to put back on by morning. Layering was adjusted deliberately. Too many layers caused sweating, which later froze. Veterans, learned to enter rest periods slightly cold, allowing body heat to build gradually. Damp clothing was dried against the body, despite discomfort, because frozen fabric offered no insulation. This was not instinctive behavior. It was learned through failure. Units that rotated watches frequently and enforced clothing discipline fared better than those that treated rest as an individual matter. Shared body heat became a tactical necessity, not a sign of weakness. One of the least discussed adaptations was communal sleeping. Soldiers slept pressed together in tight formations, often under shared coverings. This reduced exposed surface area and allowed heat to be conserved collectively. In Chinese units, this practice was culturally familiar and doctrinally accepted. In Western units, it initially met resistance. Over time, necessity overrode custom. In foxholes and shelters, men learned that shared heat meant survival. This practice, really influenced later cold weather training, especially in special operations forces, where group sheltering has actually become standard doctrine. Shelter, honestly, mattered more than fire, and, fire was often avoided. Fires were dangerous in Korea. Smoke and light could reveal positions to aircraft or artillery. As a result, many units slept without heat sources at night. Shelter became the primary defense. Foxholes were deepened and roofed with logs, earth, and snow. Snow itself became an insulator when packed correctly. Wind was the real enemy. Soldiers learned to seal drafts obsessively, even at the cost of ventilation. This approach reduced frostbite and exhaustion more effectively than open fires ever could. It also influenced later military architecture, including the design of Arctic fighting positions during the Cold War. Sleep deprivation was accepted, but total collapse was not. In extreme cold, uninterrupted sleep was pretty rare. Soldiers rotated rest in short intervals, just to get by. Shivering was always monitored, and any numbness was treated immediately. Leaders learned to treat sleep as a managed resource, not just a personal privilege. Units that enforced rest discipline, even if only in fragments, managed to maintain combat effectiveness for longer periods. Those that ignored it, they suffered from silent attrition. This lesson, it carried forward into later conflicts and training doctrines, especially in high-latitude environments. The Korean War, really reshaped how militaries think about cold survival. After Korea, cold weather doctrine changed fundamentally. Sleeping systems became layered, modular, and focused on moisture management. Training emphasized field improvisation rather than reliance on issued gear alone. The war demonstrated that, honestly, survival in extreme cold isn't just about sheer toughness, it's about systems thinking. Heat, shelter, clothing, and discipline, they form a chain. If you break even one link, the body just fails. These lessons, they were absorbed unevenly, but they still remain relevant wherever soldiers have to operate beyond supply lines. Sleeping in -20 degrees Celsius without sleeping bags was not a heroic feat. It was a consequence of logistical failure met with human adaptation. Remembering how soldiers endured these conditions really matters because it strips war of abstraction. It reminds us that endurance is actually built from small, disciplined choices repeated again and again under stress. Understanding these often overlooked realities, it deepens our understanding of conflict itself. War isn't only decided by strategy and firepower. It's also about whether people can rest, recover, and function in hostile environments. If you value this kind of careful, grounded military history, go ahead and subscribe to Echoes of Valor. and share this video with others who care about understanding war beyond just the headlines. These lessons were learned at great cost, and honestly, they remain worth remembering.